Hey guys, welcome into Sports Around the Bar, your weekly sports talk show. As always, I am Jakey Bartender, and I'm joined on center stool by my co-host Drew. And Drew, we got a lot of basketball today, man. Football has been notoriously quiet. I've been trying to find something to talk about, so I managed to dig something up. I mean, I do want to still talk football. Obviously, it's our bread and butter for a reason. I think everybody kind of enjoys talking football, but we've got a lot of basketball to talk about today too.
We do, and we are going to sneak some football in there, like you said, and get a little bit of that going on. But as one series is completely over, no surprise there, we still have a series that has still quite a bit of ball left in it.
Absolutely, and I just wonder, let's start with that. Let's start by talking about the NBA playoffs going on right now, and I wonder if Toronto has laid the dagger in the Bucks' heart here with this last game. They say 85% of the time you win Game 6, you wind up winning the entire series. Do you think Toronto has already slayed the Bucks, or are we going to see a little bit of fight? I mean, Giannis came out and said that, we're not done yet, but that's pretty much like the company line, right? You have to say we're not done yet. I don't know,
Right.
Drew. 105-99 at home. Do you think the Bucks are dead?
It was a game that all in rights the Bucks should have won. They just couldn't hold on to their lead. Brian, thank you for joining us, man. I still think there could be a Game 7. I honestly still think there could be a Game 7. I know Toronto's a tough place to play, but they've gone out there before and won. They can do it again, but there's just going to be a whole little bit different because it's Game 6 and this is elimination time.
Well, they have, but they haven't done it in the series because Toronto won, games 3, 4, and then they won 5 as well. So they've won at home pretty much in that building.
I'm talking about in the
right. No,
yeah.
I understand what you're saying. I think you look at this, man. I was sitting there saying, I think it was Scott in our last show that said it's a bench series now and how important the benches are going to be. And I kind of said I didn't agree with that. But if you look at it, Toronto's bench 100% outplayed the Bucks as well. I said all you need is the rest of these guys to keep going. But you look at the way Game 5 went, man. It was all about the benches. I mean, Toronto's bench absolutely came to play, especially with Fred VanVleet putting up 21 points from the bench. Do you even know who Fred VanVleet is? Does
Absolutely.
anybody?
Yes, absolutely. I know who that is. He's a Wichita State boy, and
he's on the bench for a reason, is what you meant to say.
and he's a good player. He played for Wichita State, like I said, and I enjoyed watching him in college level, and he's making a home in the NBA. I mean, he might not be a starter, but you know what? Sometimes that doesn't matter if you want to be a millionaire.
Absolutely. Now, Chris says, what's going on, man? Good to see you as well. Brian says, Game 7 he hopes. Look, I agree with him here because we're, in very short order, going to be running dry on sports to talk about. We have a lot of plans for the NFL coming up here, but it's also nice to have other things to talk about. It's nice to have something in our rotation, man. If the series ends really quick and then we get Golden State stomping whichever one of these teams gets out of here, it's going to be a dry spell. There's not going to be a lot going on in the wide world of sports outside of baseball, right? I mean, we always know the summer is tough, but maybe basketball can stretch it out a little bit for us.
Yeah, maybe a little bit, dude. I mean, it's going to be, I don't know, man. To be honest with you, and I've said this from the very beginning, I think any team out of the East that can beat the Warriors is the Bucks. And I know that Raptors are putting a hurting on them right now, and it definitely looks like the Raptors had the Bucks number. But I just don't really see the Raptors bench playing like this into the series with Golden State. Because they're going to need to. They're going to need absolutely everyone firing on all cylinders, including Fred VanVleet, who is, by the way, I want to remind you again, a Wichita State guy. And
how many home schools do you have? Kansas State, Kansas, Wichita State.
Any
Big
of
12
them.
country's yours.
It is all mine.
And I agree with you, man. I think the bench has come to play for Toronto. I think the Bucks, like I said, the starters need to step up. Well, Bledsoe had 20, Lopez had 16, Brogdon had 18, and then Middleton was the only guy who didn't really perform too much. He only had 6 points, but he had 10 rebounds. I mean, you look at the rest of these guys, that should be good enough for the starting team to win, but then Hill was the only one to do anything off of the bench for the Bucks, putting up 12 points. So you look at it, man, maybe this is a bench series. Was I wrong? Do you think this comes down to whose bench outplays who? Because it's kind of like Neil said in the comments. Kawhi has put the series on his shoulders pretty much by himself. Yeah. I know we saw a decent game out of Siakam this time, and Lowry had 17. But Drew, he's turning into a volume shooter. We've never seen Kawhi be a volume shooter, and he's doing so in the series because nobody else seems to be able to get the job done.
He did in the last series too against Boston.
Exactly. I mean, we've seen a different Kawhi in this playoff series than we've seen maybe his entire career.
But I think because he realized the teammates around him he cannot rely on to put up points. He's going to have to put it on his own shoulders to do that. And that's why I really think that the Raptors are going to struggle against the Warriors. And Chris, thank you for letting us know basketball sucks. Appreciate that, man.
Basketball that's on is much better than football that isn't. So hey, who knows? Maybe next year we'll have an XFL going on right about this time of year. We'll have a little more football to talk about. But for now, we got to talk about what's going on, right?
Yeah.
What's going on in the world of football? Guys are getting hurt at minicamps. So,
it's tough.
And we don't like dwelling on guys getting hurt, do we?
No.
Only when we have to.
Right.
Exactly. So, going back to this series here, Drew, I think if whoever wins Game 6 here will be my favorite to win Game 7. If the Bucks can somehow wrestle the momentum back from the Raptors, I think if they are able to win in Game 6 in Toronto, finally put one up on the road, you go back to Milwaukee, there's no reason they shouldn't be able to win that one too.
They should have won their last game too in Milwaukee. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. And we sat there, we watched that game, and to be honest, I was like, oh, the Bucks got this. I mean, they looked pretty well dominant through the whole game until pretty much the end.
I agree. Also, to settle an argument going on in the comments, Andy Dalton is better than Lamar Jackson. I don't know exactly how far into it you guys have gone, but give me Andy Dalton who can throw on a better franchise, and I think he'd wind up being better than Lamar Jackson is right now. Jackson needs to get 100% more accurate before we're talking about him being a great quarterback in the AFC North. Still has some potential. I mean, he's got the record. I don't want to go too far off the rails here, Drew, but how big is record versus performance? I mean, with what we've seen, we're like, does that make him a good quarterback? But then it's working. The team's winning.
To be honest with you, they both had the exact same record, and that's 0 playoff wins. Till one of them win a playoff, to be honest, I think it's a wash between the two. I think it just kind of depends on what offense you want to run.
Rearranging deck chairs in the Titanic. Doesn't matter who your quarterback is
until
you
win.
win.
You're all going down, yeah.
Fair enough. Why don't we move on, though? Why don't we talk about the Lakers? Because that's another big story that's coming up here. Obviously, basketball seems to revolve around LeBron James, and he seems to know that. He is getting started on free agency a little bit early, reaching out to a lot of guys. I've heard him talk to Jimmy Butler. He's liking Kyrie Irving wearing a Lakers jersey in a fan photoshopped kind of picture. He's pushing hard, man. He is pushing incredibly hard to get another guy out there to play with him. Do you see them landing a big free agent this year?
Oh, yeah. I honestly do. I don't. Not only is it just LeBron that will bring someone in there, it's also LA. I mean, you're talking about one of the most greatest franchises of all time in the NBA. This is the Lakers. That's just one of them. I mean, talk about the most championships. You talk about the Lakers. You talk about some of the best players to ever play the game. Put on a Lakers jersey. I mean, someone's going to go down there. Is it everyone he wants it to be? Who knows?
But isn't that what LeBron did? He put the Lakers jersey on and he said, oh, don't worry. I'll have success when I go down there. And we really didn't see that. Obviously, they couldn't work a trade out for Anthony Davis. Do you see something like that happening where it's a trade to bring somebody on? Or can they convince somebody who's actually off of a contract like, hey, come be LeBron's number 2? Because I want to run through some of these guys. And we'll talk about how likely it is because there are a lot of options out there. There are a lot of big names that are likely to hit free agency this year. I think at least one of them should probably consider LA, but maybe they don't. Maybe you don't want to play second fiddle as one of these guys. I mean, we talk about everyone wanting to be the alpha and wanting it to be my team. LeBron did that. He left, and he was the alpha, and then it didn't work out. So It's tough playing by yourself. Do you see one of these guys sitting there kind of throwing it up and moving on to play with LeBron? We'll talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely, I think it is. I mean, you're talking about either going with LeBron and having a chance to win a championship, or you're talking about going to, I don't know, Kawhi to the Clippers. Do you win a championship in LA Clippers? I don't think so. I think having someone like LeBron there, even though he's old, it's just that's what people want. They want to win. They want a ring. They want to sit there and say they were one of the best of all time in a certain year. And people that don't have that ring yet, I mean, that's important to them. But you look at this list, and you are bringing up people that already have a ring. Kevin Durant, Klay Thompson, Kyrie does. Kawhi does. I mean, you're going to need to find someone that's hungry and wants a ring now.
Well, let's move through the list then. Let's talk about Kevin Durant. Obviously, he seems to be the most likely guy to leave Golden State after this championship. In fact, I think we're starting to see a little bit of the backlash here where everyone said, oh, this team's lost Durant. They don't stand a chance. Then they go and sweep the Trailblazers in 4, despite having big deficits at halftime. It's like they're like, okay, now let's really start playing. Still, not even a contest, man. Do you see Durant moving on because his feelings are hurt? Because I could definitely see that. He seems to be more emotional of a guy than a lot of other players are, and I think when he's out now and everyone's sitting there saying they don't need Durant, he doesn't want to go through his entire career winning championships and everyone's saying, oh, well, you just joined a great team. You won because you were on that team. He wants to go somewhere and win by himself, or at least win and have it said that, oh, they won because they had Kevin Durant, not they won and Kevin Durant was on the team.
I will get to that, I promise you. I just had Neil says, don't forget the Clippers were only team to take Golden State to 6 games, and that's without a superstar. Man, I
and
get
having traded players away like Tobias Harris.
And I get it. I understand exactly what you're saying. They had a great run. By all means, if they had a superstar, they might have gone a little bit further. But you're going to sit there and tell me that this run goes into next year? You're telling
I think
me,
so.
You're
Well,
telling
hear me out here.
You're
They
telling
play
me
really good
82
defense.
games plus going into playoffs, they still have this hot streak going?
Yeah, and let me tell you why. Because
In
they
the
play
West.
really good defense. So if you add a scorer or two here in free agency and say, look, this can be your team. You can have all the glory because you're the one putting up points, and everyone else on this team is going to play really good defense, try to slow some of these stars down. I think that's what gave Golden State the troubles. They were playing really tight defense. They're a scrappy team that likes to get in your face and do the dirty work. You do that, and you add a scorer like Durant, maybe like Klay Thompson, and all of a sudden we're talking about this being a team that maybe you're not winning a championship, realistically, because Golden State's still the 800-pound gorilla, and you still have Houston in the West. But they're going to compete. They're going to be like the Portland Trailblazers this year, where they're going to upset some teams, and maybe,
And
just
they get
maybe,
swept?
you go in there. I don't think they're going to get... Well, they got swept by Golden State, but they made it to the Western Conference Finals. I'd say that's some success.
No, it is.
They didn't play Houston, but they made the Western Conference Finals.
I'm going to call it right now, and I guess I could be extremely wrong, but as much as the Clippers were a great story for the NBA, it won't be the same next year. It just won't be. I'm sorry. All that momentum, everything you had was put into this year. I'm not saying this team can't be above 500. I'm not saying this team can't even make the playoffs next year. But do I see them taking someone like Golden State to 6 games? No, I don't. I think that was pure just the fact that momentum was on their side. They got excited. They saw some light at the end of the tunnel, and they just couldn't beat it. Now, if they got lucky and they got into like seed 7, they played someone like the Nuggets, they probably would have beat the Nuggets because they were playing that great against the Warriors.
I agree.
But if you're going to always come in and be at the number 8 seed and you're always facing someone like the
Well,
the
they won't
Warriors,
be an 8 seed.
I mean,
they won't be an 8 seed with a score. That's
Well,
the thing. If you get a high-profile score, again, you don't ever know anything. You could have a year like the Lakers, who thought they were going to be
the
third
Lakers
and fourth.
have one of the highest scoring players in NBA history, and they didn't
True.
even make the playoffs.
And he missed 20 games during the regular season.
So I'm
that
just getting a
absolutely
point
hurt him.
across.
I mean, you missed a quarter of the season. So that absolutely hurts him. If he'd played all those games, did they make the playoffs? Yes. And I get what you're saying. You don't ever really know. But you have to assume, like, okay, if we put all the pieces in place, we're going to have some success. If not, how do you build a team? That's exactly what you need to say. So, of course, that's my pitch. This team plays incredibly good defense. All you need to do is come to town. You're going to be the focal point of the offense. You're going to score a lot of points. And then all of a sudden, you're a good team.
Neil, hold me to it, man. Hold me to it. I want to know, man. It kind of gets me excited to think about it. But, you know, I'm a Nuggets fan, so I'm a realist. My Nuggets being the 2nd seed, guess what? That's not going to happen next year. They're not going to have the best home court record next year. I mean,
Talk about a team that needs another star.
and talk about what if we pick up one of these people? What if we pick up Klay Thompson?
And this is definitely the lottery. This is how the NBA works, right? Anyone who lands one of these guys goes from being, we don't really stand a chance, even though the Nuggets were a 2 seed, to all of a sudden we're a contender. And that's exactly where a lot of these teams are at. So the Lakers, I feel, are in the exact same position here, Drew. If they can land someone like Kevin Durant, if they can convince him, like, look, I know Golden State, everyone sits there and criticizes you and says, oh, you didn't win. They won while you were on the team. Here's your chance to flip that around because the Lakers did not make the playoffs. If we go from that to maybe running with Golden State to maybe winning with LeBron and Durant, a healthy LeBron and Durant together, all of a sudden, maybe some of that talk dries up a little bit. I think everyone's still going to say it, but that would be my pitch. My pitch is not maybe the truth, but I would sit there and tell them, like, look, you can guide this team and it can be all you.
And Neil, I do want to get also another thing that you said there. You said Doc Rivers is an underrated coach. I am in complete agreement with you, man. There's no doubt about it. He is an underrated coach. He was the first one to take, 3 superstars and actually make it work for,
Exactly.
And
well, maybe not the first. Going back, like Boston had the big 3. There were a lot of guys.
He
like
was
that.
Boston.
Well, that's true, but fair point. I forgot about that.
I was like, that was him. But no, I'm just saying he is one of like the first coaches.
Or you could say Phil Jackson did it. Let me amend myself.
Okay,
you can say
right.
Phil Jackson did it up there in Chicago.
He's one of the first coaches
with
to
Jordan
literally
Pippen
take
and
a lot of a group of all stars and make them play together and win a championship. I actually had an opportunity to watch that team play against my Nuggets, and it was one of my highlights of watching professional sports is to watch a team that won a championship. Being a fan of the Kansas City Chiefs and the Nuggets, you don't really get to see a lot of teams that win a championship when you watch them. So it was exciting. Or living in Tennessee with the Titans, you don't see that.
Yeah, that ain't gonna happen for a while. I think they came about as close as they're going to come for a long time. Going back to some of these guys, let's talk about the Lakers' chances to land someone like Kyrie here, Drew. Do you think they could bring that Cleveland connection back there?
Kevin Durant. Did
we can talk more about him. Yeah, sure.
I felt like I didn't get my chance.
All right, go ahead.
And I don't want to leave him out because
he's not important. He's not any good anyway.
He is. I mean, he is the highest free agent right now. He is the one everyone's targeting. Anyone that's
the most likely to leave, probably.
More than likely, he is the one that everyone's looking at and going, just chop it. Look at their lips. They're just hoping to get their chance to put a big contract on this guy and make him part of their team. And someone like the Clippers would definitely be a better team with him. I just don't know if you can sit there and say, because the Clippers had such a momentum this year, bringing in someone like Kevin Durant, they're automatically at the top of the West.
And Neil says getting someone like Jamal Crawford or Lou Williams would do that team wonders. The only thing I will say about this, I imagine he's talking about the Clippers still. The only thing I would sit there and say, or maybe he's talking about the Lakers, I think it would help out. If you're talking about the Clippers, I think they need more star power because the moral of the story is still we need to beat Golden State. If we're talking about the Lakers, I think it's the same argument. You need multiple guys to match up with their 3, 4, 5 superstars, however many they're going to have. And I just don't think Jamal Crawford or Lou Williams is going to be enough to beat a team like that. Is it going to help them in the regular season? Of course it is. Does it help them make a deeper playoff push? Yes, I believe that too. But again, sooner or later you're going to have to face the Warriors in the West. How are you going to do that? It's not with guys like Crawford and Williams. It's with guys like Durant, Kyrie.
Yeah.
You need a superstar level acquisition, no matter which one of these teams we're talking about, to have any ghost of a chance against them. It's all about stacking stuff up in the NBA now.
He was talking about the Nuggets because Lou Williams actually plays for the Clippers.
I gotcha. Well, I didn't know if he was talking Lakers. I didn't know if he was talking
Crawford does too.
I didn't know if he was talking Lakers. I didn't know if he was talking Clippers. But my whole point is, any one of these teams needs to add more guys, and they need to add more superstars. Do I think the Clippers can do it with with a superstar going there? Well, like you said, they played him the best. Do I think that's maybe a fluke? Yeah, probably a little bit. But do you think you can add a superstar and say, hey, maybe next year we beat Golden State because we played them really tough this year? There's an argument for it, right? Some kind of argument. Or do you think Golden State just took it easy on them for those couple games? Because I think that might be a little bit.
I think it just depends on how much the Warriors lose. Because if the Warriors lose a lot of these free agents, they're talking about losing KD. If they're looking about losing Thompson, well, what about Boogie Cousins? What if he leaves? Stephen Curry's an elite player. Probably going to go down as one of the best ever to play. And when you have him on your team, you always have a chance to win. But losing those two guys, do you stay at the top of the West? Do you stay at the top of the West when someone like, Houston or LA's going to pick up somebody?
Well, they've done it before. If they keep one of the three, like we know Draymond's going to be around. We know Steph Curry. I agree. And here's my thoughts. We know they're going to have Steph Curry. We know they're going to have Draymond. If you keep Cousins and he can somehow stay healthy, again, if Cousins is hurt all next year and that's all they have, the race gets incredibly tighter. I don't know that they beat Houston at that point, but if they keep one of the three and they stay healthy, they're still the team to beat by far. We've seen them do it where it was just Draymond, Steph, and Clay. We've seen the Splash Brothers pretty much take the NBA over by themselves. I think they've taken a back seat since they brought Durant on, but not everybody can shoot the ball. That's the biggest criticism of Golden State is they have so many guys that can be the leader that it can be difficult and guys kind of fade to the background. I think Klay Thompson has been the biggest kind of guy for that, where because everyone else needs their shots, he's kind of left by the wayside sometimes. But these guys are absolute stars. You could put them on another team, let the offense run through them, and we would be talking about them like any other star in the NBA, where they're one of the best players. They have 5 of those guys.
Yeah.
And some of them are going to leave this year. But if they still have 4, if they still have 3, I'd say they're probably the favorite unless Houston can go land one of them.
Right. What's going on, Homero? I'm glad you could join us. He says, my team is the Rockets. He says he wants us to talk about the drama between Harden and Chris Paul.
Well, I think the kind of issue with Chris Paul is he's starting to get older and starting to deteriorate. So when I talk about the drama between them, I think this is, number one, a team full of drama queens. They're the team that goes and complains, we didn't get enough foul calls against Golden State when James Harden is the most fouled guy by far in the NBA. He shoots the most free throws, the most three-point free throws. The guy got 100, I think it was, fouls called against him on free throws past the three-point line this year in the regular season. You know who the next closest guy had? 34. So how can a team like that go out there and complain about something? They're a team full of divas. You're going to have this kind of headbutting between them. You have to, because there's too many big personalities, and if you're not winning, the big personalities tend to turn on each other. That being said, Chris Paul's getting older. His skills are starting to decline a little bit. Eventually, you're going to have to replace him. I didn't like the trade for this simple fact because they gave up so much to get him, and he's already old. He's 34 or 35 now at this point here, Drew. How much does this guy have left in the tank? Now that he's falling off, you're kind of saddled with this bad contract as well. It's like Houston has closed its own window because they brought on such an old player.
Oh, man. So, everyone's friends when everyone's winning. When you're winning, obviously everything's working great. Everyone's getting along. When you start to lose a little bit, you struggle of keeping that friendship going. I mean, look at LeBron and Kyrie. They didn't get along. They still won a championship together. As far as Chris Paul goes, and talking about him getting old, luckily for him, he plays a position at point guard that you could play in your late 30s, close to 40. But you have to develop and change your game, kind of like what Steve Nash did, kind of what John Stockton did. You know, some of the greats that had to change to how they played their game and kept themselves still playing. So you can sit there and say he's old, but to me, he is seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. He is seeing, the rainbow. He's ready to win that pot of gold and win a championship. And as much as they are drama queens, I can't fight that thing. When you start losing, you start pointing the fingers at the people around you.
And totally
that's
agree
literally
with that.
what it is. I think, to be honest with you, I think it will be all squashed at some point in time during this offseason. They'll get over it. They'll come to cooler heads, and you guys will be back at it being probably the second best team in the West. But, is it something to pay attention to? Absolutely. If they were younger, I think it would have already come to an end a long time ago.
If I'm the Rockets, my whole selling point here is, guys, let's keep it together, especially if I am the coach or if I am the GM. My whole point is let's keep it together because Golden State's going to lose some weapons here. We've battled them for 2 to 3 years now where we've been on the cusp of winning that. The CP3 thing was supposed to put us over the edge. Now that they're starting to fall apart, we're starting to see that window open. If we can get Chris Paul to have that kind of swan song and have one more great and elite year where he's scoring the basketball, he's distributing as well, then we can beat Golden State. That's my message. If I'm Houston, relax, because guys, pull together and we have a chance of winning this. This is going to be the most vulnerable Golden State's been in 5 years, Drew. Yeah. I mean, this is the opportunity. You cannot afford to sabotage yourself right now. So that would be my message if I'm if I'm anyone in the organization.
Yeah.
That is my message. Let's pull together instead of dividing here. I just don't know if Houston can do it because, like I said, they have so many egos. It's tough to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
You ready for round 2?
Before we read any more comments? I'll grab it a second.
I'm ready for round 2, so do me a favor.
All right. Will, thank you for joining us, man. I'm glad you could be here.
Thank you.
I just want to hit some of these comments real quick just because we guys have been talking. Brian says Cousins could quite possibly be the best free agent next year. Man, I don't know how you can say that with Kevin Durant there. I don't know how you can say that with possibly Kawhi being free. Cousins, like he said, and I definitely agree with, he needs to stay healthy first. Whatever he gets, it might be a big 1-year contract, but it's going to be nothing more than 1 year. He's going to have to prove himself to be healthy.
Well, kind of goes back to Homero's point. He says he doesn't see Cousins getting another big deal. I do, though, because there's so many teams in the NBA that are starved for any kind of superstar to be on their team that I think some team is going to sit there and say, it's worth us rolling the dice. There's too many Houstons out there. There's too many Memphis that do not have good enough players that are going to say, I can find the space in the cap to give this guy a max deal or whatever his max would be, and I can sit there and turn that into a guy that, if he's healthy, can get us to the playoffs. I know he didn't really have that success at Sacramento, but you can sit there and say I can build a team around DeMarcus Cousins, a healthy DeMarcus Cousins. There's going to be a team that says, I'm willing to pay to find out, because right now we're just treading water. I mean, is Houston doing anything special not Houston, I'm sorry. Is Phoenix doing anything special right now?
No.
Is Memphis doing anything special? Are the Bulls doing anything? No, these are all teams that are stuck in limbo. Someone is going to say, I will roll the dice on the off chance he stays healthy and gets us some sort of relevance where people are talking about us like a contender.
Yeah. Steven, I love the comment, man. He says Denver will beat Golden State in the playoffs before Houston ever does. Man, I'm a complete agreement. I was hoping they'd get a chance to face each other. I don't really know if they would have won this year, but man, talk about a team that's up and coming. Romero's agreeing. He says Denver is scary. There's no doubt about it, man. This is a team that's up and coming. Talk about bringing anybody else in there, I can't remember who the one that said it, but someone like Lou Williams or Crawford coming in and helping Nuggets, it'd be huge just to get another scorer in there. But you got to think how young that team is and how much better they can get.
Another quick comment. I know we're going way off topic here. Will asks, what do we think about Sue going to Tampa? And Neil says Sue is done for sure, man. Terrible signing. I kind of agree with both of you here. I think, Will, from one standpoint, what have you got going on in Tampa on the defensive side of the ball? I think you roll the dice with him. You sit there and give him the $9.25 million for this 1 year that he's sitting there commanding. And you sit there and say, maybe we get the best of Nakamada and Sue. Maybe he can sit there and shore up our defense. Neil, I'm kind of with you here saying it's probably not going to help much, but if you're Tampa Bay and you don't have a lot going on and you can find the money because you just got rid of Gerald McCoy, why not, man? Why not roll the dice? You're in a roll the dice situation because nothing else is going right for this team except maybe the passing game. And even that is going to take maybe a step back or two, I think, with all the subtractions.
Yeah, absolutely. Man,
that defense is going to be terrible if you don't do something.
Well, I don't think Sue's what you should be worried about. I think you should worry about the development of your secondary. I think that's where you need to pay attention to
and Devin White, because you need a leader on this defense.
When you don't have a pass rush, you need some kind of coverage in your back because regardless if it's Sue or McCoy, with JPP gone, you're done. I mean, there is no other person on your line that sit there and go, okay, that guy can rush his passer, give us double-digit sacks. It's not going to be there unless there's someone just out of the weeds that no one saw coming. I don't see it, man. It's going to take some big trade for you guys to pick up some kind of pass rusher. So, to be honest with you, as a Bucs fan, I'd focus on your secondary and hope that those picks last year, that those guys start developing and start learning how to cover a little bit better because you're going to need it desperately. Because when your offense start putting up points, which we hope as you hope as a Bucs fan, I'm not a Bucs fan, you are. You start putting up points that your defense can hold some of these teams back because that's your issue. You guys gave up too much through the air.
And going back to basketball here, Homero says that DeMarcus Cousins is really bad in the locker room and he doesn't get along with coaches. I understand that, but a lot of these teams don't have very much talent at all. So if you're Memphis right now and you have the second pick, you're bringing in Morant, you have Mike Conley as well, who's likely to stick because you paid him too much money. Why not, man? Why not go and add the talent and sit there and say, we'll find a way to manage this because you're not going to the playoffs otherwise. You might as well do something that gives you the smallest chance of getting to the playoffs. You got to remember, these GMs need to save their jobs. If you're too bad for too long, for 2, 3, 4 years, they're going to find someone else to ruin the team. So you might as well at least go out there and roll the dice, right, Drew? Any chance of success is better than just 100% certainty of failure.
Right. Absolutely. All right, let's go back to our free agent list that the Lakers could possibly be picking up because we have not been talking about that. We got a little bit about Durant. Anyone who could pick him up automatically, that team becomes so much better, and it could possibly run a huge playoff run and possibly a championship in the West. No doubt about it. Who knows? Maybe he'll end up in the East. Maybe he wants a little bit of an easier road. Maybe he wants to do the LeBron thing. Who knows? But let's talk about the second person on your list.
No, I mean, well, we talked about Kyrie a little bit when we said LeBron was already liking the Instagram posts showing him, a photoshopped Laker jersey and everything. Do you see a kind of Cleveland connection here where maybe you bring Kyrie back for old time's sake? I think this is the most likely signing because I think at least top deal. I think Jimmy Butler is probably the guy that I don't know if I'd call him elite. He's a very good player at this point in his career. I don't know if I necessarily think Jimmy Butler gets you to the playoffs, but if everything falls apart and you don't get one of these elite guys, I think they kind of retreat to Jimmy Butler. I think Kyrie is the most likely of any of these elite players coming to town. And, yeah, I get it. It didn't work out with the Celtics. And what a transition, Celtics to Lakers. You don't see that happen too often. But I will say this. I think him and LeBron together, if LeBron finds his health again, can be just as dangerous as they were in Cleveland. We saw him without Kevin Love a lot at their time in Cleveland. They were still very successful. He's the clutch to LeBron's consistent when you don't need him to come up big. I think these two match each other very well.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I do think they need to bring someone else in besides that. It's rumored that the 7th pick for Ball, it's not true.
It shouldn't be. I wouldn't consider it. No. I mean, well, here's the thing. What are you getting out of pick 7? This is a 3-player draft that we think everybody's elite. After that, it's really a roll of the dice. The NBA draft is one of the hardest ones to sit there and find any legitimate talent outside the first couple picks. If you're the Bulls, yeah, I don't mind trading pick 7. Would you trade it for Lonzo Ball and his dad and all the problems that come with him? I don't think so. I don't think they're 100% sold on him anyway.
To me, it's not. Well, I mean, they just got rid of Jimmy Butler. Talk about a problem in the locker room, but I don't really think it's just the drama that he brings. I think it's just the fact that he's not worth the 7th pick. I mean, I know he was picked highly out of the draft when he got drafted, but so far he's been a bust.
And injured and not very effective when he's out there. He's shown a little bit of flash. We've seen some plays where he's getting better and everyone's like, okay, maybe he can develop into that guy.
There's a lot of players that show flash.
I don't know if I want to give up the 7th overall pick on a guy who's shown a maybe I could be good. I think I'd rather just draft the guy who maybe I could be elite. and that's the chance they're going to get here. I think you'd be better off taking someone like Bol and just absolutely throwing darts at the board and say, we'll take this guy, and maybe the big man can lead us to some success. We get like a Joel Embiid-style player where we teach him to shoot, and all of a sudden we got a big man or something. I'd rather see that than them trade for someone like Lonzo Ball.
Yeah, I would too.
Let's talk about Kawhi Leonard going to the Lakers. Obviously, he's a California guy. He's from out there. Obviously, he wants to move back towards the Clippers, is the rumors. Do you see him maybe trading sides of town and saying, I can play with LeBron and we can go win a championship? Because the rumor is everyone's sitting there saying he'll be comfortable in Toronto. I've seen a lot of people say he'll be comfortable in Toronto. Toronto's had all this success. But what happens if they get to the finals? Because everyone wants to win a ring here, Drew. What happens if they get to the finals and Golden State stomps them in 4? Or they win in 5, but 4 games are very convincing, and then Toronto steals 1 at home where they like eke them out, like in a double overtime scenario. I really just don't see him sticking around and saying, well, we can win with this team, because you're always going to have to go through Golden State. That's the bottom line. So these guys are going to want to go places where guys can beat Golden State. Who's the last guy to beat Golden State? LeBron James.
Yeah.
So does he consider it?
I think he absolutely considers it. I think him staying at Toronto is everything short but a championship. If he does not win it, I don't see him staying there. I mean, we just talked about it a little bit earlier. He has changed his game. He has started scoring a lot more points, putting up a lot more shots because he's realized the team around him is not going to be able to carry him and his defensive style of play that he likes to play. Mm-hmm. He has to change who he is, and not that he's not capable of doing that. We all know this guy's one of the elite players. I just don't know if that's what he wants. I don't know if that's what he always has to rely on his shot to win everything. I mean, don't get me wrong, this guy wants to be the number one guy, but you know what he wants more? More rings around his fingers.
I agree. And that's what everyone wants. I think Kawhi, more than anybody, has been more humble coming from the Spurs, where he says it doesn't necessarily need to be all about me. He's not the guy that rips 30 shots every game or 40 shots a game because he needs to be the guy scoring the basket. He's the guy that says, I'll play really good defense, I'll be the leader, and then when you need me to score, I'll do that too. Toronto has needed him to score, so he's done it. He's absolutely stepped up to the plate. I think to him, it's more about, I want to go somewhere that can win, and I think the Lakers probably can win. Do I see him going under LeBron James' wing? Because to me, if LeBron James was just as good as he is and had a personality like Kawhi, everyone would want to play with him. Everyone would want to go to the Lakers. We don't see that, though. I think everyone's sitting there afraid of being overshadowed by LeBron and being marginalized, being pushed to the side, because we've seen this year especially, when things don't go right, he says, I don't like you, I'm just going to trade you. It's time to move on. I mean, we saw Isaiah Thomas get the shaft as well, too, where it came down to, yeah, you had a good year last year, but things aren't working out. It's time for us to move on, and I don't really like you as a person, so I'm going to go talk to management and get you traded. Nobody wants to play with that.
I agree, but
and Kawhi's better than that, but still.
The name drop, I don't know, man. Isaiah Thomas Jr., I think, has more issues than just that. I mean, you're talking about tons of teams that he was with that couldn't seem to be able to keep with. You know what I mean? Well, what did he spend? He's been with the Celtics, and then he went to Cleveland, and then he went to the Nuggets, and I feel like he put another stint somewhere else that I can't not remember right now. I think it's 4 teams he's been with ever since he had almost an MVP caliber season. There's something going on with the guy. Yes, there's health issues, but even when he's healthy, he's not finding himself on the court. But beyond that, I agree with you. I think when you're talking about a young player that is developing and isn't fully where he's at, I think the fear of LeBron James is something all those young guys should be scared of. But we're talking.
I think veterans need to be scared.
I don't think so, man. I think these veterans, when you're talking about like Kawhi, you're talking about Kyrie, you're talking about Kevin Love, you're talking about players he's played with. I don't see that, man. I think these guys know, hey, LeBron is quote unquote the best player in the world. Let's just play his ball and win a championship.
Well, let me go to the comments here really quick here. I don't have necessarily time to sit there and go into it, but let's talk about where Scott says he doesn't think Kawhi is LA material. I will say this. I think he's more suited to be out in LA because he's so unassuming. I think a lot of people expect those big personalities, and sometimes those big personalities explode. If you're winning, it's great to have those big personalities. If you got a guy like Kobe, and that's just an absolute winner and a killer on the court, it's okay to have those big-time personalities. Yeah. I think a guy like Kawhi, who's not very assuming, who's very humble, who drives an old truck to work and everything all day, is the perfect guy for LA because it doesn't seem to matter how much criticism he gets. He just shows up and he works hard every day. Doesn't matter. I think he's the perfect guy for that scenario. Also, Homero says LeBron needs a big to get out of the way and hit threes. I disagree with you. I think LeBron needs to be the big at this point in his career, and he needs a bunch of small shooters that when he drives in and he plays inside and everybody collapses on him, he can dish the ball to. I think Klay Thompson is the better signing for them, and let me tell you why. If you look at LeBron's career, he has thrived inside close to the basket. And yes, I know he's developed his shot. He's a very good shooter as well. But if you look at the way he plays, look at guys like Chris Bosh. Look at guys like Kevin Love. When they went to play with LeBron, what happened? We saw their production go way, way down. We saw that absolutely collapse. Do I think maybe he's changed a little bit? Yeah, he's losing a bit of his explosiveness, or he will in the future here. But I think LeBron needs to still be the guy who plays inside with shooters on the outside because it's obvious big men cannot seem to thrive with LeBron around. He needs to go to the basket and cannot have the big guy clogging up the lanes and being inside and drawing too much attention in there. I think he needs to be the biggest guy on the court and have everyone spread out. Or maybe you have one rebounder and everyone else plays small ball and plays out by the three-point line. Sorry, I know that was a spiel, but I don't think a big is where LeBron thrives. I think LeBron thrives with as many talented smalls playing around him as he can.
Yeah, but you can't go into an NBA game and your tallest person is 6'8".
No, I'm saying on the court. Well, ask Golden State; they play small ball.
Yeah,
as
they brought in Cousins.
I mean, Draymond sometimes plays the 5 for them.
And Durant's just shy.
Well, they brought in Cousins, but he doesn't play, and we know that. And they have tall guys. They have Klay Thompson, who's like 6'11". They have Durant, who's very tall as well. Basically a 7-footer, even though he says he's not.
Klay's not 7. That's
Kevin Durant. He's not a 7. Well, Durant's tall. Klay Thompson's tall as well. My point is here, they're not the typical team that runs with guys that are 6'4" or anything like that out there.
They also don't have shooters the way they do either.
Well, I agree, but I think LeBron can play the 4 to 5 position, and I think that's probably where he's best. You play that, and you put all these great shooters. You let LeBron take it inside. Everyone will collapse because it's LeBron, and you're afraid of him putting up 40 points against you, and then he dishes it out to him. You have a catch-and-shoot guy like Klay Thompson, and that's where you succeed.
I absolutely love the Klay Thompson talk about joining LeBron because that's exactly what LeBron wanted in J.R. Smith. You know, that's what he wanted in someone like that, someone that could catch and shoot, someone who isn't, doesn't have to sit there and make space to shoot. But to do that, it would be. I just don't know if Klay Thompson would do that. I honestly think if the way I read the guy, if Klay Thompson decides to leave, it will literally be a decision to get away from all the All-Stars and say, hey, my success was me, not because Stephen Curry and Kevin Durant were so great. We've talked about this before. But you're right. Do I think LeBron needs a catch and shooter, someone that's an elite level? Absolutely. Do I think that they should look about not bringing in someone closer to 7 foot and playing center? No, I completely disagree with that. I think regardless that the big man in the NBA is a dying scenario, maybe minus a few players, you still need that big guy. I mean, look at the 2 teams in the East that are left. You're looking at Brook Lopez. You're looking at Marc Gasol. 2 big guys. Maybe they're not their center points in their offense or their defense, but guess what? They need them there for those rebounds. They need them there to kind of stand post and stop those drives from coming in the middle. To sit there and say that a team doesn't need that, even with someone as great as LeBron is or was, I don't know if I can get behind that.
I just think it hurts his game. I don't think you need to have an elite big player next to LeBron because we've seen him play with 2 of them in Chris Bosh, who looked really good when LeBron left and really good, especially before he got there. He looked great before he showed up to Miami. And then you look at Kevin Love, who is Mr. 2020, 20 points, 20 rebounds, and then he goes to Cleveland, and all of a sudden they're talking about this guy's a bum because he's playing with LeBron. I think the way LeBron plays does not really set a big man up for it to have a lot of success. Am I saying you don't need one of those guys specifically? No, I think it can help out, but I'm just saying don't go out and spend on him. That's why I think Anthony Davis to the Lakers is not as effective as some other guys could be. I think they'd be good together. I'm not saying Anthony Davis would go back to being would go and be terrible because I think out of him, Kevin Love, and Chris Bosh, he's the best of the 3 by far. But you can't sit there and tell me that you can look at what LeBron's done with these superstar big men that have come into his team, and we've seen that kind of talent go around him. I mean, remember how much trash everyone's talking about Chris Bosh when he's in with that Miami team, and everyone's like, this dude's garbage. It's not really a big 3 because he's terrible. And Kevin Love was the same way. When he was on the Timberwolves, and it was his team, everyone was talking about this guy being one of the best players in the league. He goes to Cleveland, everyone's sitting there. It's night and day. You're talking about Kevin Love not being any good anymore. I think the way LeBron plays does not help a big man. And I know, again, we're 8 miles off track, but I think the way LeBron plays, he needs to add a bunch of small guys and to space things out. I mean, the NBA's changing. If you're talking about beating Golden State, yeah, they have Cousins. He doesn't really play, though. Draymond sometimes is the biggest man on the court for them. They're not exactly a team that plays with a big guy. You don't necessarily need to have an elite big man to succeed. I think the Lakers would be better addressing the small ball before they address driving in, because I think LeBron's got that covered.
All right.
All right.
Well, you want to get up? We're getting off subject, so we can go on forever about this, and we can. And
Absolutely.
I'm trying to let it go, guys. Let us know what you think about it in the comments. And I can see already your comments are saying, let's go on, let's move on. I love how you guys don't want to talk anything, but it seems like either baseball or football. I know most of you guys want to talk football, and we do have it, and we're ready to talk football. If you are, we're going to talk about the NFL sleeper teams. We're talking about the teams that could make a deep run in the playoffs, that could possibly win the Super Bowl, that no one's sitting there talking about. You throw out the Patriots, you throw out, the Eagles and the Chiefs and the Saints. You throw those teams out that everyone's talking about. What about the teams? We had a
Well, it says we're still going.
technical difficulty.
Let's just assume we're still going.
We are not going on my phone, so that's awesome. But anyways, guys, just let us know in the comments when you can see us and you're ready to go. We are a little confused about what just
Facebook
happened.
might have crashed. We might still be live on everything else, though. So, like I said, we'll
It's
just
a
finish
good
it out.
Possibility. I mean, we're losing views and gaining them, but we're not showing
All right.
the video.
I see 6
Well, you
people
want to
on
get
here.
up?
I think we're back.
getting
Yeah, I
off
know. I hope
subject,
we're back. If you saw any kind of service interruption, sorry about that. I think
and
Facebook
you know
crashed
we
on
can.
us.
And I'm trying to let it
Hopefully
go,
we're
guys. Let us
in
know what
there.
you think about it in the comments.
You see anything on
I
your
can
phone?
see already your
No,
comments
nothing
are
on my
saying.
phone, but
Let's go
all right,
on.
we're
Let's
just
move
gonna keep
on.
going like we're
I love
going.
how you guys
All
don't
right.
want to talk anything.
Hopefully
but
they're
it
in there.
seems
So
like
I
either
said,
baseball
let us know in the
or
comments if you see
football.
what
I know
we're
most of you
saying,
guys
because if not, Facebook screwed us over yet again. The
Yay,
old eternal enemy. I don't know.
I don't either.
Again, we're still on the stream, so all right, we'll continue, I
Football.
guess.
And we
See
do.
what happens.
Nah, well, it's not. I think it's Facebook. All right, I'm going to go back to what I was saying. These are the sleeper teams that no one's talking about that could possibly make a deep run in the playoffs, a deep run into the Super Bowl. The teams that no one is sitting there going, I don't really know if I can see it, but guess what? We see it. As we put our two heads together and we talk about sports more than we probably should. I know my wife is tired of it. These are the teams that we came up with. Do we want to start from the bottom or do we want to start from the top?
Let's start from the top. Who is the biggest sleeper, in your opinion, that can win a Super Bowl? And we're not just talking about make the playoffs or anything like that. Who could win a Super Bowl and surprise everybody because they have a great year?
To be honest, it's a team that literally disappointed a lot of people last year. They brought in an elite, quote-unquote, an elite quarterback that sits there and says, hey, we can win behind this guy because everything else is looking great. You had a great defense. You had a great offense. All you were missing was that top elite throwing the ball quarterback, and that's the Minnesota Vikings. I mean, talk about a team that had everything going for it until they brought in Kirk Cousins, it seems like.
Well, I don't even think it's that. I think the
It just
defense.
seems
Well, it's
like
not
it.
just that.
Yeah.
I agree with you. They had a bad year at quarterback. We saw him kind of have a great year the year before in Washington, get paid, and then have that big kind of regression. But the defense. Let's talk about the defense. Going from like one of the top 3 to top 5 units in the NFL to being basically useless. I mean, Everson Griffin had his mental health breakdown. We saw Mike Hughes, who was expected to play a big role in that, also get hurt. I think that if you look at it, the Vikings still have a lot of talent on this roster. If they could ever find themselves, Drew, if Kirk Cousins plays, 50% better than he did last year, we're talking about this team maybe winning a Super Bowl. They have great wide receivers. They have a great running back in Dalvin Cook. They've tried to address it with some other guys coming in as well to be his backup. I think if you look at this Vikings team, if they get the defense on track, if, I understand that, but
Yeah.
they have a lot of talent to be one of the teams that finished outside the playoffs last year.
I mean, you're talking about a team that had every right to be in the conference championship 2 years ago. I mean, and I know they did, but I meant like in the sense that I know they flopped horribly. But think about it, they had Kirk Cousins there instead of Case Keenum. I mean, could you only imagine what the difference would have been? Because come on, guys. We all know that Kirk Cousins is a better quarterback for the NFL than Case Keenum is. And if you're not on that bandwagon, I want you
To get on that bandwagon.
to get on that bandwagon. But I want you to go back and look at these games in this film. It's There's a pretty big difference between Kirk Cousins and Case Keenum, in my opinion.
I totally agree with you, man. I think they upgraded that position. I think the kind of issue came in that all of a sudden the offensive line had to block for somebody who could not avoid pressure like Case Keenum could, and they've tried to address that. They brought in a bunch of guards. Time will tell if any of them are any good, but if the Vikings can kind of get that offensive line fixed, we're going to be talking about them being a team in the NFL that is just as dangerous as they were 2 years ago when they went all the way to the NFC Championship and got stomped, but got to the NFC Championship. Right. There's no reason this team can't win a Super Bowl.
Right. Absolutely.
Let's talk about our next team on the list here, Drew, the Falcons. Talk about injury setting you back. I mean, the Falcons have been absolutely plagued by them last year. Do you think if Devontae Freeman comes back, if Deion Jones puts in a healthy year, we get guys like Keanu Neal back, can they still win a Super Bowl?
No, absolutely. I think that they're one of those teams that are a huge disappointment for last year, and it's only because of injury that's what happened. You're still talking about a team that went out and played every game tough, every team tough, and you're still talking about an elite offense and a defense that I would not consider elite, but definitely put their stamp on it the year they went to the Super Bowl. There's no doubt about it. And not only that, they got a giant chip on their shoulder. You're talking about one of the biggest deficits ever in Super Bowl history that they lost when they were up by 31-3 and lost to the Patriots. I mean, this team has not forgotten that. The coaches have not forgotten that. Organization and the fans have not forgotten about it, because us fans here as NFL fans are not Falcons fans. We have not forgotten about it. This team has every right to sit there and say, hey, we're one of these sleeper teams. And to be honest, if they had a good season last year, and then they would have had coming into this year, they would not be in our list of sleepers. They would literally be the one of the teams that we talk about being a good possibility of winning. But because of how crappy of a year they had last year, they became a sleeper team this year.
Okay, I'm getting a few people saying we're good. I'm getting Brian saying we're lagging. Look, I think it's something going on with Facebook, because everything else is saying that it's still running. Curse to the old enemy again. Facebook screws us up. We're going to keep going. Yeah. I hope you guys can hear it. I'm just, again, it's messing with our comments as well, too. I think it's putting them on a pretty big delay as well. We're going to try to power through, though, Drew. Talking about this other team, the Falcons, again, they've addressed the offensive line. That was a big weakness last year. If health kind of comes into the factor and they stay a healthy team, they can absolutely compete when you talk about their weapons. Devontae Freeman, the great receivers they have there, Matt Ryan at quarterback. You get the offensive line to protect it, all of a sudden you have an amazing side of the ball where you can play offense really, really well and keep up with teams.
Yeah.
And then the defense. We're not far removed from them being a top 10, 11, 12 defense that could totally bounce back if they stay healthy. I think the Falcons are one of those teams that, even though they didn't have a successful year last year, 2019 could be much better than them simply because they're healthier than they were.
We got a couple comments here. Scott's saying the Jags, and Bees are saying the Chiefs are a sleeper team now. Ah, man, Scott, Jags. Let's talk about that, man. Talk about one of the best defenses that played 2 years ago. Started out the season like they were going to be the exact same defense, and then they stopped. And then they have taken some pieces out of that defense to try to see if that helped, but it did not. Did they take a step forward because they brought in a quarterback like Nick Foles? Absolutely. But guess what? Nick Foles can't throw to nobody. He has to have some kind of weapons around there. I know someone's going to sit there and say, what about DD? What about Leonard Fournette? Well, guess what? Those guys haven't done it year in and year out like some of these other teams that have elite weapons on their offense. For that team to even remotely go back to what they were, that defense has to prove something different. And I worry, if you're a Jags fan, that what you saw 2 years ago, you guys might never, ever reach that step until you do a complete rehaul. And I'm not saying any of those players aren't good, but you already seen the discord of, I'm blanking on Telvin Smith, that he's saying he's not going to play this year.
Jalen Ramsey not showing up.
Ramsey not showing up.
We've seen Coughlin not afraid to call them out.
A lot of these a lot of your players on this team are struggling to say, I want to play for this organization.
Yeah, and absolutely, I totally agree with you, but they didn't quite make our list because they have so many question marks still. The offensive line, what happens if they're terrible and all of a sudden you have a guy like Nick Foles taking a lot of hits? Could he be a Blake Bortles again? Do I agree they upgraded at quarterback? Sure, but then the offensive line's been very suspect up to this point. They've had some injuries as well. They need to prove a lot more than they have in the past couple of years if they're going to be successful. More than that, they lost their best pieces. They lost guys like Allen Robinson. They lost guys who are elite receivers, and he's proving that in Chicago, saying, I can be a great wide receiver, and it wasn't a fluke in Jacksonville. Now who have you replaced him with? Like you said, Dede Westbrook's probably their best wide receiver. They do not have the weapons to compete. That's why I think they have not made our list yet. Maybe the defense comes back. Maybe the defense plays really well in 2019, but they've lost pieces as well. I think when you look at the Jacksonville Jaguars this year, I'm not going to call it a prove-it year. They have too much to prove for us to put them on this list of teams that could win a Super Bowl.
So what about B's comments saying the Chiefs are a sleeper team now?
No, they're not a sleeper team. I think everybody's sitting there saying the Chiefs are going to be really good. That's why I didn't include them. Indy's another team like that where, yeah, on paper they should be a sleeper team when you look at this roster, but everybody's talking about the Colts could win a Super Bowl. The Colts could be a dynasty. So they're not really a sleeper. I think the Chiefs are in the same kind of scenario where nobody's looking at the Chiefs and saying, man, this team's going to be butt next year, right? Everyone knows the Chiefs are a contender. So I agree they're a contender. I wouldn't call them a sleeper, though.
Right, no, I agree. I just wondered if you had a comment for that. Maybe B's you're poking fun at me being a Chiefs fan. You know, the Bears are my sleeper team. They're my number one.
Now, Brian also said Ramsey was great 2 years ago and had a terrible year last year. The back half of the year was okay for Ramsey. I think Ramsey really stepped it up when some of the criticism started coming out, but he started slow. He didn't really recover very well. Boye was not as tough against the coverage or against the pass as he was 2 years ago as well. We saw an entire regression across the board in Jacksonville, whether it was leadership, whether it was just disheartening because they weren't as good as they were. I don't know what it was, but we saw them definitely start incredibly slow out of the blocks and never really recover till after week 8 or 9.
You say they were number one defense going into, I believe it was either week 4, 5, or 6 that they played the Chiefs, and then they all went downhill from there.
And they were a very good defense, but I believe they were 2-2 or 1-3 going into that game. I think it was 2-2. No, I agree. They were playing well on defense, but as a team, they were like, man, our offense can't score points. I'm out here busting my ass, and the offense is scoring 7 points a game. And then you have the Chiefs come in and dunk on you. I get it. It's human nature, right? You would want to sit there and say, man, this isn't working out. Like, why am I killing myself?
Yeah.
Exactly. Why am I killing myself if we're not going to win anything?
All right, let's go into our number 3 sleeper team.
The Packers. And I get it. Everyone's going to sit there and say, how can the Packers be a sleeper when some of these other teams that we named off didn't make the list? But the Packers won, what was it, 6 games last year?
Something like that.
They did not have a good year, even with Aaron Rodgers. I know he was battling a little bit of injury. But what has changed about the Packers? The defense. They have totally spent on this defensive line. They brought in Zadarius Smith. They brought in Preston Smith. They brought in Adrian Amos. They've spent draft picks on guys to try to upgrade this team. They have done everything under the sun to get the defense fixed, or at least up to competitive levels, to help Aaron Rodgers out and make it so he doesn't have to score 45 points here. If they can keep this defense to allowing 20 to 25 points a game, all of a sudden we're going to be talking about the Packers being a threat in every game they play in. That was, to me, the biggest setback. They had to score on every possession to win a game, or very near it.
Yeah, this was the team that I kind of wanted to go sit there and say I can't put them in the sleeper list until you sat there and said, well, look at their record, what they did. It's true. The record these last couple of years, if it's Aaron Rodgers being hurt or the team just not being able to get wins, this team has struggled. But it's hard for me to sit there and put a team with Aaron Rodgers at the helm as a sleeper. But I get it because he has not performed.
This is the second year in a row
he's not performed properly, and this is a team I think that also could move up the list after I said they weren't necessarily a sleeper because you sit there and look at those additions on defense. They finally went out there and decided to take a chance at some of these free agents and brought in proper ones, not just all-stars, but you're talking about players that play every down, that have this motor that's just non-stopping. Amos, Zadarius Smith. I love the Zadarius Smith signing. I think that's probably going to be a great signing for them when it's all said and done. And I like the fact that they moved on people from like Clay Matthews. As much as a lot of people think he has a lot left in the tank, I think it was nice to see a refreshment in that position on that defense. And not only did they do that, they changed the guard at head coach. Regardless if McCarthy was getting dry as far as the speech goes, what he had to say, or if his play calling just wasn't right with what Aaron Rodgers wanted. I don't care what it is. It's just a fact it's a new face. It's a different kind of franchise, even though Aaron Rodgers is still at the helm. It changes it all up. So this team could literally be number 3, or it could be number 1 at the top of the sleeper list.
No, I agree with you. I think they're one of those teams that's kind of in the limbo, and like you said, they've kind of made the point by getting rid of guys like Clay Matthews, saying it doesn't matter what you've done for us in the past. We need guys who are going to succeed, and we need guys who are going to get the job done. Clay Matthews is kind of taking that step back in his career where he was not doing it. All of a sudden, you're bringing in guys who have been doing it for the Ravens and the Redskins and saying, these are the guys we want. We want guys who are going to succeed on defense. We're not going to pay guys simply because you've done stuff for us in the past. It's about succeeding now and this year. Who gives us the best chance to do that? I get it. It's cold, but that's a business, right?
Yep.
That's what happens in the NFL. If you're not getting the job done, they move on. Props to the Packers for doing that and saying, it's time for the next kind of generation of talent to come in here.
Scott says, changing in the guards with these young quarterbacks like Mahomes and Luck would be a good AFC Championship game. Man, I'm in complete agreement with you. It'd also make a great Super Bowl as well. Unfortunately, that won't happen. But I think you already saw it, man. I mean, Goff made the Super Bowl. The Colts played the Chiefs before the AFC Championship. The Chiefs,
we saw Deshaun Watson make it in.
We made Deshaun Watson make it in. You saw the Chiefs almost make the Super Bowl with a young
Dak
quarterback.
Prescott, we don't want to forget him out.
I don't. We also still have, even though Nick Foles isn't old, but he's not young either, you got to give Nick Foles that too. I mean, you're talking about a quarterback that has not had a lot of success, and he went off and won a Super Bowl.
Absolutely.
I mean, you've already seen the change at helm. It's just, to be honest with you, I think we're going to, and I say this in the most, I don't know, professional way I possibly can, I think we're going to miss when this stuff's all gone. I don't like Brady. As much as Drew Brees is a great quarterback, I don't care if he wins another ring. I don't care if Phillip Rivers wins another ring. I want to see the Chiefs win it. But when all these guys decide to say, hey, I'm calling it quits and retire, we're going to miss it because these are some of the greats.
I absolutely believe this is an end of an era. We're going to look back at this and say, man, I remember when guys like Phillip Rivers and Ben Roethlisberger were out there playing in these great games, and I remember this kind of age of quarterbacks. We talk about that. Yeah. I believe absolutely we're going to talk about this as an era coming to an end. So I'm with you there, Scott. I do believe we're seeing a bit of a changing of the guard, but I don't know that old guard's quite ready to give it up. Brady won this year. We saw Breeze make it deep as well. I don't think Big Ben or Phillip Rivers are done yet either. Phillip Rivers had more success this year than Roethlisberger did, not making the playoffs. But I think we still have another year or two before we finally see that handing off of the torch where, okay, all these old quarterbacks, all the guys who have been winning these Super Bowls are gone now. Who's next? I think that's going to be 2 or 3 years from now instead of, maybe this year.
Yeah.
Let's talk about our fourth sleeper here, Drew. And this one is the final one that I want to sit there and stamp and say, absolutely, we believe this team could be a sleeper. The 49ers. This is a team that, again, has battled through games with no quarterback whatsoever. If Jimmy G can give us 16 games, and that's a big if, but if Jimmy G gives us 16 games and the offense is clicking, this defensive line is going to be really good for them. They're going to be able to rush the passer. They're going to be able to get after them. They've got guys like Richard Sherman still who might have something left in the tank to make a statement here. They have players on defense here, Drew. This 49ers team, all it takes is the quarterback, and they're going to be a team that maybe could surprise a lot of people.
Right, and you're going to be... For the 49ers to sit there and just be honest here, to make the playoffs, you're going to be looking at teams like the Rams taking a step back. You're talking about the teams like Seattle taking a step back. But this is a possibility that this might be the NFC team, division that puts 3 teams in the Super Bowl this year. Or in the playoffs this year, in the playoffs this year. Because you're talking about 2 teams that are already proven that they're playoff contenders.
Right.
And then you're talking about a team, if it wasn't for injury... Because if you go back and look at all these quarterbacks they put in there, they made games out of every game they played.
They did. Maybe not everyone, but I agree. They were in a lot of games that they shouldn't have been.
Right.
And
that's what I'm getting at.
You're talking about bringing a guy like Nick Mullins in off the street, and all of a sudden you're going to go and compete with some of these great teams. He's going to go throw 3 touchdowns in a game and 250 yards. It looked like he was a starting quarterback.
And what that shows is that Kyle Shanahan and the talent around what Jimmy G should have had when he was playing at that point in time is good. And it's good enough where you're bringing a talent like Jimmy G. I mean, you can sit there and say Chris Mullins is just as good as Jimmy G because of the stats they put up. No, let's be honest. There's a reason why Mullins was on the street, and Jimmy G was one of the most sought-after free agent quarterbacks when he came to the 49ers. This guy is literally a step above that guy. There's no doubt about it, in my opinion. And if he can stay healthy, like you said, which is a big if, this team is scary.
And that's why we have him at 4, because it's all riding on something we haven't seen yet, is Jimmy G giving us a full season of football. But if he does, all of a sudden the 49ers, with these, they've added weapons, even though we don't necessarily like them. They've brought in guys like Jerick McKinnon and Tevin Coleman. They've brought in guys who have been able to make things happen in the past. Maybe we're talking about the 49ers making the playoffs and even making a Super Bowl push, too.
Yeah, no doubt.
Our last one, and I have a big question mark by it because I don't know I necessarily want to consider it, but I had to pick a 5th team because no list completes at 4, is the Washington Redskins. We saw this team go 6-2 with Alex Smith, who was throwing, let's face it, Drew, less than 200 yards a game. They don't need a superstar quarterback for this team to succeed. They have the defense. They have the offensive line. They have great running backs. They need to get healthy, and they need to have a quarterback who's going to be able to put up 150 to 200 yards instead of 75 to 90. And that's what they kind of had with Josh Johnson when Alex Smith got hurt and Colt McCoy got hurt.
And this is kind of like your 2 years ago Vikings when they brought in Case Keenum. and they had a great defense and a team around them. Well, they might not have the receiving weapons the Vikings did, but guess what? The Redskins have Case Keenum. I mean, as much as I down the guy said as far as him being a starter in the NFL, he doesn't really turn the ball over until he went to Denver. That was not one of his things where you could sit there and say, hey, he can't keep the ball safe. Well, he did for a long time until he went to Denver.
Absolutely.
And now he's coming to a team like the Redskins, and as much as no one talks about it, this Redskins defense is one of the best defenses in the NFL. There is no doubt about it. And to sit there and just not talk about this team being scary, when they were 6-2, 7-2, I don't remember what it was last year, and you bring in someone like Case Keenum who could probably stay healthy, it's a big, big boost.
Absolutely. And Will also said Kurt Warner was bagging groceries before the NFL season started, so anything can happen. You're right, man. I agree with you. There are those kind of flash players that, hey, they missed it and everybody missed them, and there's a reason, and they should have been in the NFL, but they was out in the street and everything. That's pretty rare, though. That is, you're talking about a needle in a haystack here. Do I think Nick Mullins is that needle in the haystack? Probably not. I think Kyle Shanahan's offense makes him look like it, but I don't think he's that guy. He's not Kurt Warner. That was unemployed, and man, how did 32 teams miss this guy? I don't think he's that guy.
There's a lot of guys that are actually like that in the NFL history books if you go back and look at it, but it's rare.
But how many of them are quarterbacks?
But it's, well, I mean, look at Doug Flutie.
Yeah.
There's another guy that wasn't really on a lot of people's radars because of his size. My point is you're talking about one of the toughest jobs in the world to get to be in, and that's a starting quarterback in the NFL. There's only 32 positions in the whole world to be a starting quarterback. So anytime a guy makes it, regardless if he's number one pick and never misses a game, or if a guy that comes off the street and plays it, it's a magnificent story because of what they're doing on this field and what it means to the NFL.
I agree with you. Now, one more point here before we get out of here, Drew. The reason I had the big question mark next to the Redskins is I said, look, you just need 200 yards passing, and this team can win games, right? The problem is they've gotten worse at receiver, right? I mean, last year we were like, man, they have nobody. They have, Jamison Crowder, who's the best weapon in the wide receiving corps, and he's left. He's left now to go to the Jets. You have a guy like their young receiver. Dotson, yes, thank you. Josh Dotson, who hasn't had 100 yards receiving for a first-round pick to this point. That is their biggest weakness by far, so I say they need 200 yards. I think they've done a good job getting quarterbacks who may be able to deliver that. When you look at Dwayne Haskins, maybe he's the guy that gets you 200 to 300 yards a game. I think even signing a guy like Case Keenum, maybe he gets you 200 to 300 yards a game and limits those mistakes. But who's catching the ball? That's why they have the big question mark here, Drew, is because they are so depleted at wide receiver. They may be the worst team at pass catcher when you count receivers and tight ends. They're going to be running the ball a lot. Their best receiver is Chris Thompson, and he's a running back who plays 8 games a year and he gets hurt.
I'm kind of with Brian. Jordan Reed is a beast when healthy.
But he's another one of those guys.
They also have Vernon Davis.
He's made of glass. Not Vernon Davis.
Right.
Reed is made of glass.
He played all 16 games last year.
Okay, and what do we see?
First time in like his whole career.
What do we see? Alex Smith struggled to throw to a tight end, so how good is he really?
Well, this isn't Alex Smith.
I agree with you. there. They're changing quarterbacks up. Maybe they find a connection.
That's why I made my biggest point.
What has Alex Smith been doing?
That's why I made my biggest point to this was they're bringing in Case Keenum. As much as I don't believe in the guy as a starting quarterback in the NFL, the biggest change is Case Keenum because this defense is still good. And they only got better. They only got better because of what they added to it. So, do I agree that there's not a lot of receiving weapons? Do I agree that their running game is good but could be better because we don't really know what we're getting out of guys? Yes. But guess what they were missing last year? A quarterback that could stay healthy. Case Keenum, so far, has been healthy in his career.
I agree. And he's also a guy who gets away from pressure. So when that offensive line all gets hurt and all of a sudden the quarterback's under duress, like you don't want him to be, Case Keenum's good at getting out of that. Another thing Case Keenum does very well is he limits mistakes. I know he kind of struggled in Denver, but Denver's offensive line was an absolute sieve. They let everybody back there. I think Washington's going to protect him at least a little bit better towards the early part of the season. I think Case Keenum's a good signing as well. I totally agree. You don't need Peyton Manning here. You don't need Tom Brady. You don't need 5 touchdowns a game out of your quarterback. You just need a guy who's not going to throw 3 interceptions and is going to throw maybe 1 touchdown every week or 2.
Yeah.
And we're talking about this team being dangerous. They're getting Darius Geis back, who, let's face it, did not play all last year. You're getting an unknown factor here who everyone thinks could be a good player. You're getting Adrian Peterson again. You're getting Chris Thompson, who hopefully can play a full season as well. They have weapons at running back. Run the ball, play defense, and just don't make mistakes. You can get deep into playoffs doing that. I mean, Seahawks did it. Carolina did it. Denver did it. we've seen teams either win or get very close to winning doing that same philosophy. There's no reason the Redskins should not be on this list.
Absolutely.
All right, Drew, we've got some special thanks here. Guys, I appreciate you sticking with me. I still can't see anything on my screen, but I appreciate you sticking with us through all our Facebook problems, and Drew's got some special thanks for you.
Yeah, guys, thank you again so much for joining us this evening. We appreciate all the likes, the shares, the comments. It means the world to us, especially during our technical difficulties that you hung out with us for a little bit longer.
Ours or Facebook's?
Well, it's ours because we're the ones giving you our show. As much as we want to point all the fingers to Facebook, we hope...
I'm gonna.
We hope that you guys still enjoyed the show and what it was. But real quick, thank you to Brian, Chris, Neil. Dude, I'm so sorry. I know you were with us for a long time. Zedeca. I don't know if that's right or... Do you want...
I think it was Zeka.
Zeka.
If we missed you, apologies.
So sorry for mispronouncing your name. Homero, Will, Steven, Scott, and Bees. Thank you guys so much for all the comments. We appreciate all the love.
Absolutely, guys. We will be back on Monday to talk about everything going on in the wide world of sports. Again, we do not have a show planned at this point. We're going to see what happens with these NBA playoffs. We're going to see what happens in the world of football. But we'll be back to talk with you about everything going on in sports. We may even get to baseball at this point, right?
Yeah, definitely.
It's the forgotten sport.
Guys, have a great Memorial weekend. God bless the United States. Drink one for us, maybe 6 or 12 for me, but we appreciate all of it.
Exactly. Remember the spirit of it too, guys. It's a great holiday. Spend time with your families and everything. We will see you back on Monday. Brian, we are going to blame Zuckerberg. Again, I'm writing him a letter right after the show. I'm sure he'll see it.
I'm sure.
For Sports Around the Bar, I am Jake, your bartender. This is Drew, and we will see you guys on Monday. Have a great weekend. Drink some beers for us.
See ya.